Christina Hill.
Here.
Clay Thomas.
Here.
Don Christensen is absent. Rob Pierce
Here.
here via Zoom, and Brad Stanley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can Ms. Gustafson read the ethics law announcement, please?
Certainly. Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the board today, number one, you have received a gift or loan. Number two, you have a pecuniary interest. Number three, you have a commitment in a private capacity such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship. Or number four, you provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered. You must please disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And furthermore, you must abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board today, please disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to say that even it's confusing, but the procedure is that everyone is required to wear a mask in the meeting for the time being. Okay, the appeal procedure, Mr. Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you. Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and you want to appeal its action, you may do so in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is signed by the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, is there any public comment at this time?
I have no public comment in chambers.
Thank you.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Can we have need a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I so
Ms.
move.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
Mr. Stanley seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. How about the minutes of the last meeting? I read through the minutes. I didn't see any changes that needed to be made. Anybody? No? Can we get a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
Also move.
Okay. Any second?
This is Rob. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, public hearing. The first item on the agenda is administrative permit case number WADMIN 21-0010, benefit concert. Julie Olwander, Trevor's going to give the presentation. I noticed the event is today.
No, I'm sorry. This event is on the 19th of September.
Okay.
So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Trevor Lloyd with Washoe County Planning and Building. This item is for hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an administrative permit for an outdoor community event for the Incline Village Hospital Foundation, with a Beach Boys benefit and fundraising concert. The event will be held at 1047 Lakeshore Boulevard on September 19th from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. with approximately 400 people in attendance. Oh, there it is. This doesn't seem to be working. Thank you. All right, this request is, again, for an administrative permit for an outdoor community event for the Incline Village Hospital Foundation. The event qualifies as an outdoor community event under Washoe County Code. This event will be held in a private residence over 3 parcels at 1047 Lakeshore Boulevard, and it will occur on the 19th of this month from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. The cost for the tickets is $250 for each ticket. This concert will raise funds for the Incline Village Community Hospital. The entry to the event will be staggered, with VIP guests arriving at 2 p.m., preferred guests at 2:30, and general admission guests at 3 p.m. There will be security at the main entrance to the estate, checking in attendees. Guests will be wearing wristbands that will correspond to their ticket level, and volunteers will help provide direction and instruction. Overhead is a site plan or graphic of the proposed property and the event. The event ingress and egress and security station are up at the north end along Lakeshore Boulevard. That's under A. Sanitary facilities will be located sort of in the middle of the property at B. And the performance and the audience location, as well as the security station, are located on the lake, where the letter C. There will be no fixed seating. Seating will entail a few beach chairs, but mostly it will be standing room and beach blankets. There will be a reception for 1 hour before the concert at 4 o'clock with alcohol beverages and appetizers. The concert will run from 4 to 5:30, and everyone will be off the property at 6 p.m. The applicant has contacted the 2 adjacent neighbors, and they both are aware of the event and have voiced no issues or concerns. Security services will be provided by Triumph Protection Group with 1 security guard located at the entry of the estate during the event and another guard in the reception area. Sanitation facilities will be rented for the event with 4 portable toilets and 4 hand washing stations with locations throughout the site. There will also be 2 outdoor bathrooms with sinks for hand washing available for use. Off-site parking will be available at the Parasol Tahoe Foundation building. Shuttle services will be provided to transport attendees from the off-site location to the event. Also, valet parking will be provided for preferred attendees. Incline Village Community Hospital will have at least 15 volunteers to help with the cleanup and trash and removal of trash from the premises and brought to the Incline Village Community Hospital. This proposed administrative permit was properly noticed to residents within 750 feet of the site. Various agencies reviewed the application. Their comments, their conditions are included as part of your staff report. Staff is able to make all 4 of the required findings as shown in the staff report and recommends approval of the proposed administrative permit. That concludes my presentation. If the board chooses to approve this project or agree with staff's recommendation, we offer the following motion for your consideration. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you have.
Thank you. We'll hear from the applicant now. Is the applicant available? Kari Epstein? No? Okay. Is there any public comment, Madam Secretary, on this item?
I have no public comment.
Okay.
I have no public comment via Zoom.
Okay. Okay, do we have any questions from the board?
I don't have any.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I don't either. Seeing no questions, are we ready to make a motion? Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustment approve administrative permit case number WADMIN 21-0010 for Carly Epstein, with conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Development Code, Section 110.808.25, that being 1, consistency, 2, improvements, 3, site suitability, 4, issuance not detrimental, and 5, effects on a military installation.
Second?
This is Rob. I'll second it.
Okay, Rob, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 21-0007, Hidden Valley Reclaimed Water Tank. And the staff is Chris Bronzik. Do you have a presentation, please? Oh,
Yeah, you're right, this should be one if you're following the agenda.
I mean, I think you should at least announce that this is withdrawn, too.
okay, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry. I was out of order on that.
Also, if you could just mention that item 8B has been withdrawn as well.
That what?
Item 8B has been withdrawn.
Okay. Yeah. The agenda has item B, administrative permit case for the Renowned Hospital Foundation event has been withdrawn. So we'll go to item C, administrative permit case number WADMIN 21-0009. Yes?
Ask for clarification
Yes?
Mr. Lloyd or our legal staff, should we ask for any public comment, or was there enough time given on this withdrawal that no public comment would be needed?
I believe that when the agenda was posted, it was already posted as withdrawn. We're just simply noting for the record that it was withdrawn, so there's no necessity for public comment on item B.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. Today we're looking at WADMIN 21-0009. This is 5100 West First Street. The proposed project is located off of West First Avenue and McGuffey Road in Sun Valley's planning area. The request is specifically for a multifamily use type. In this case, it is for a 200-unit apartment community. As part of this project, the request also includes grading, and the subject site is zoned medium-density urban. So with medium-density urban, this allows for 21 dwellings per acre. This site is roughly 10 acres, so it would amount to about 210 dwellings. The site is roughly 650 feet from the nearest bus stop for RTC Route 5. In the image above, the yellow line indicates RTC Route 5, and the blue line indicates distance. So this subject parcel went through an MPA and RZA, a master plan amendment and a regulatory zone amendment in 2015. The intent was to change the master plan category from suburban residential to urban residential, and the regulatory zone from public, semi-public facilities to medium-density urban. In 2015, as part of that application process, it was stated that this location was intended to be multifamily use. It's looking like the clicker's not working.
Did I go too far?
So above is the site plan. The site plan, as shown, includes ample parking for the development at hand. It also includes a clubhouse, a playground area, and a swimming pool for the residents at this location. Next slide, please. So this project does include 3 standard building footprints. And these standard footprints are classified as 2 stories. Under Washoe County Development Code, these are classified as 2 stories because of the basement units not classifying fully as its own story. So you will see throughout the development these 2-story structures with a section of basement units throughout. So with multifamily use types comes open space standards. This open space standards are related to the common open space that's shared by the residents. And so these common open space standards under our code requires 200 square feet of common open space per unit for developments of 12 or more units. So with 200 units, they're required to have 40,000 square foot of common open space. This common open space must be courtyards, swimming pools, large lawn areas, and tennis courts. One thing to note is that landscaped areas, retention ponds, and berms of that sort do not classify as common open space for residents. This standard is memorialized within the conditions of approval and can be found as Condition 1G. So as mentioned earlier, this project does request for grading as part of it. The project as a whole triggers 4 specific grading standards. The first is grading an area more than 4 acres. The next 2 are volume related, of excavation and importation of 5,000 cubic yards of material. And the last one is to grade or construct a permanent earthen structure greater than 4.5 feet in the front yard setback. So the grading calculations for this that came through were total disturbed area of 392,736 square feet. The total cut is just under 30,000 cubic yards, and the total fill is roughly 54,000 cubic yards. It should be noted that the finished grade will contain amenities as well as building footprints at the final product. So with this application, there were retaining walls associated with it. The original site plan that was provided shows retaining walls ranging from 1 to 15 feet. Because this is an administrative permit, staff does not have the ability to waive or modify standards. So the applicant will be required to meet the retaining wall requirements as set forth in code. The code sections are listed above, but they will be required to have retaining walls that are in any front yard, at a maximum of 4.5 feet, and any retaining walls that are found within the side and rear yard are limited to 6 feet. So the applicant did provide staff with a preliminary site plan exhibit earlier this week, which should have been provided to the board as well. And the intent of this site plan exhibit was to show staff that they could move forward and meet the standards of the retaining walls while still maintaining substantial conformance. However, with that new exhibit, staff is requesting a new condition be listed within the Exhibit A. And that condition is any terraces or benches between retaining walls shall be landscaped. So due to the size of this project, a traffic study was required. It was prepared by Headway Transportation, and they anticipate this project to generate 1,464 daily trips, 92 AM peak trips, and 112 PM peak trips. The traffic study did recommend sidewalks be constructed along the property frontage and centerline and turn pocket striping also be done. NDOT did review this traffic study. They stated that the intersections are expected to operate within policy level. They did not have any recommended improvements for the intersection at this time. Additionally, RTC did, the Regional Transportation Commission, did review this project application as well, and they do recommend all improvements be implemented. With RTC, staff did discuss the existing conditions and worked with RTC staff to replace those existing conditions with the ones found above on your slide. So as part of the recommendation for this, it would be asked that we could replace the two existing conditions of 8A and 8B with the conditions listed above. So there was a neighborhood meeting associated with this project. The applicant initiated that neighborhood meeting and held it at Hobie's Casino. It was held on August 12th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. 9 neighbors showed up. Notices were sent out July 28th to over 200 parcels, and the applicant noticed a minimum of 750 feet. For staff's public notice, we noticed 102 parcels within 500 feet of the subject site. Staff is able to make all the required findings as detailed in the staff report. And staff is recommending approval with conditions, and a possible motion is above. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you. Is the applicant here and would like to make a presentation?
So my name's Connor Lahr. I'm a partner of Ulysses Development Group. We're a Denver-based developer and owner of quality, affordable housing. We're active nationwide, and we thank the board this afternoon for meeting to consider our project. I just wanted to introduce myself, and we have a team on the line available to answer questions. Jeff Frame from Frame Architecture, Lauren Chilson from the traffic engineer, Matt Sutherland on the civil side, and myself and my colleague Ryan Watt, who will be standing up and walking through the details of the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor. Please flip to the next slide. So as you all are aware, the site is about 10 acres in size, located about a quarter of a mile to the west of West First Avenue and Sun Valley Boulevard. Please flip to the next slide. As mentioned, the site is zoned as medium-density urban. It's important to note that in that 2015 approval by the Washoe County Planning Commission, the main influence that drove that decision was the appropriateness of this location for that use, specifically the proximity to existing utility services, transportation, employment centers, and schools as well. Next slide, please. So recently in Reno, we've seen indicators of demand for housing, specifically affordable housing. Recent employment growth and population growth has driven up the cost of housing significantly in recent years, both on the rental and on the buyer side. Some evidence of this are very, very low vacancy rates in Washoe County for affordable housing, and also the significant difference between the prevailing market rate rents, which you see in that table on the slide today, versus the comparable LIHTC rents for those same types of properties. Please flip to the next slide. So our development proposal in front of you today aims to address that need for affordable housing directly by providing a high-quality, newly constructed, affordable apartment community that provides access to housing to low-income households in Washoe County for a minimum of 30 years. The rents that you see in this unit matrix, are rent limits. So residents will be required to provide proof of employment and proof of income in order to lease a unit at the property. They are not rental subsidies. So this is under the Section 42 tax credit program. Next slide, please. We've seen broad support throughout the community for affordable housing, and this is just one example for you from Eric Brown, the Washoe County manager. Just a quote from a recent article in the Washoe County Gazette. Next slide, please.
For the record, Dave Snellgrove with CFA. I'm the Planning and Right-of-Way Manager. This is just a copy of the zoning map, and this kind of shows proximity to different uses. We've got Lois Allen Elementary School directly to the east, or directly to the west of us. We will have a pedestrian access that'll go up not only on the sidewalks, but one on the northeast part of the corner of the site, or northwest part of the site, that'll go directly up. There's a crosswalk that crosses McGuffey Road. So this will provide a very convenient access to many of the elementary age kids that'll live in the project. Directly to the east of us, you have a commercial zoning area that provides services, that provides employment, that implies gives you the bus route that Chris talked about too. I'll have another slide on that. Around us, directly adjacent, is medium density suburban, and our property is medium density urban. Next slide, please. This shows the developability of the site. To the left-hand side, you see a slope analysis map. The vast majority of this site is in green, which is in the 0 to 15% slopes, which is considered and supported by that map over on the right to be the most suitable areas for development. Much of the Sun Valley area does have slopes to it. This is no different, but we are in the most suitable areas for development. Next slide, please. These are photos of the existing site. That one up in the upper left-hand corner, that's actually on McGuffey Road. The school would be just to the right-hand side in that photo. And over to the right-hand side upper, that is at the corner of Slope Drive, which is only a halfway constructed street right now. Slope Drive and West First, so that's looking up the frontage of our property. And then on the northeast corner, that one at the bottom, I want to point this one out. This is a long slope drive, and this shows you a narrow section of pavement. And what I want to point out with this is there is a slope down, and right now, if there's stormwaters coming down, they come down unimpeded, and they have a tendency, and they can go across Slope Drive. So with the proposed development, the rest of the street will get constructed. One, there will be curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and also two, we'll have retaining structures that'll stop that water from just having an unimpeded path down the hill. Next slide. There is some illegal dumping on the site. It's definitely not the worst one I've ever seen in a vacant land. Up towards the northern end of the property, there are some items that are right next to the existing residential. I pointed out, I took one a little farther away so you could see where there were some that were kind of spread out. Next slide, please. Our transit and connectivity, and Chris covered this. Can you hit one more time? Okay, our site is right there where the star is. Hit again, please. And Chris had this. This matches up with what we had from the corner of the property. We're only 650 feet away. This was identified in the zone change and master plan amendment that it was approximately 1/10 of a mile to transit and to the commercial corridor where services and employment. So this shows you good proximity. And I'll point out that Route 5 can take you down. You can get, there's a couple other routes, I think they're 9 and 15 that you can get on that can get you to Parr Boulevard and Truckee Meadows Community College and different places. But you can also get down to the city center and downtown and get to anywhere that you need to go. So if you have low-income folks that are living here, they may or may not have a car. If they don't have a car, they still have transit opportunities and it's close by. Next slide, please. So our site plan, Chris covered this. I do just want to point out on the right, left, south, so the east, west, and southern portion of the site, there's not currently sidewalk on any of those frontages, and this is right adjacent to a school. So that new improvement will end up helping safe routes to school and general pedestrian activity around the area. So we see that as a tremendous positive in the neighborhood. There's 20 total buildings, each having 20 units in them, for a total of 200 units. And as Chris identified, we do meet the parking requirements per the Washoe County Code. Next slide, please. This just shows the general, I don't want to call them setbacks. This is the distance from building to building. The closest that we have, and the smallest, is up towards the northeast part of the or northwest corner of the site. Smallest distance to distance building setback would be 63 feet, but most of them are 100 to over 200 feet. We have some that are getting close to 240, 250 range. So we do have a good setback, even though this is a medium density urban project. We have pulled away, and also around the sides, the north side and the Slope Drive side will be planted almost exclusively with evergreens for year-round screening that'll help with some of lighting and or visibility issues. Next slide, please. This is where jump back and forth.
Thank you, Dave. So these elevations give you a visual representation of what the building facades will look like once construction is complete. Next slide, please. Probably a better example to help you visualize the community once construction is complete are two existing low-income housing tax credit communities in the Reno area. One is Steamboat by Vintage, which is located in South Reno. And the other is Vintage at City Vista, which is located in downtown Reno. Both of these projects benefit from the same Section 42 LIHTC program that this proposed project it will benefit from. Also, these two projects are managed by the same management company that will manage the Ridge at Sun Valley, which is FPI Management. Next slide, please. One thing I wanted to add would be that so far there are over 5,700 units of low-income housing tax credit properties in the Reno area, and hopefully this would add to that existing inventory if approved. To speak a little bit about quality of construction, once this project is complete, we hope for it to be completely indistinguishable from traditional market rate housing. So unit interiors will include in-unit washers and dryers, granite stone countertops, luxury vinyl plank flooring, and energy efficient appliances. And then common area amenities will include an outdoor swimming pool, business center, fitness center, and furnished community room. Next slide, please. As Chris mentioned, we held the neighborhood meeting independently. Typically, we would have gone to a citizens advisory board meeting for the purposes of this permit application process, but because the local citizens advisory board only meets 4 times a year, we decided to hold our own meeting independently to make sure we had local input from the community. As Chris mentioned, we provided notices to over 200 property owners in the immediate area and solicited their feedback at this meeting. So some of the concerns that were raised, first, we received some concern about the compatibility of the use with the neighborhood. So in response to that, as Dave mentioned, we're going to be providing extensive screening around the exterior of the site to prevent any noise or light pollution from reaching the nearby neighbors. We're also providing setbacks from those other uses that are well in excess of the minimum requirements for this zoning designation. We also received some concern about security at the property once the community is complete. And so in response to that, we are going to have, as mentioned, an on-site management company that will deal with any security complaints as they come up, as well as a security patrol service that will patrol the property after hours to make sure that any security issues are addressed right then and there. We'll also install security cameras at the site to consistently monitor what's going on at the property. And we also will have in place extensive resident screening criteria, which will include criminal background check, a credit check, employment verification, income verification. Some of these are required by the Section 42 program, but we intend to go above and beyond that to make sure that we have a community of residents that is an active, productive part of the community. I'll hand it off to Dave.
I'll cover the last two here, lighting and noise screening. We are required to meet the dark skies lighting requirements as per the code, and I mentioned before the screening around the site with the all evergreens. That's a good technique to use if you do have anything that might be a little bit obtrusive. The next question that was asked, and one of the big ones was traffic congestion speeds, and speeds came up as a big concern. In response to that, we actually had Headway Transportation. I believe Lauren Chilson is on the line if there's any questions. They conducted a speed study just after our neighborhood meeting, ended up finding that the speeds that were coming down per the Washoe County traffic calming rubric, it didn't necessitate any kind of traffic calming device. I was kind of surprised, I thought, by what I was hearing, that we might find something and work with the neighbors, but I do want you to understand, out of the neighborhood meeting, we did take their comments and questions very seriously and went forward and tried to make sure that we were addressing those. Next slide, please. So going to the legal findings, I'll go in a little more detail. There's a lot of the policies that we meet. I'm going to cover just those underlined ones. But, the county will utilize its higher density zoning designations to allow for the most efficient use of land. We do feel that we're accomplishing that. Also on policy 3.4, promote affordable and workforce housing. We definitely feel that we're meeting that. Next slide, please. Down near the bottom here, actually, this one is under LUT 4.1, says maintain, up above at the top, maintain a balanced distribution of land use patterns too. Item C specifically calls out allow housing opportunities for a broad socioeconomic population. We feel that we're accomplishing that with this. We desperately need affordable housing and really all kinds of housing in this region right now. And then LUT 17-3, a variety of dwellings such as housing, townhouses, apartments are all encouraged. So we do meet in that. Next slide, please. We are in a zoning designation, the medium density urban, that's allowed within the Sun Valley Suburban Character Management Area. Specifically call it out and highlight it. And then I highlighted that Sun Valley one on 1.10. And that one talks about needing sidewalks. And really, we're putting sidewalks on 3 sides of this, so that's going to drastically improve the pedestrian connectivity in the neighborhood. There's a lot of sidewalks still to build out in Sun Valley, but we're putting in quite a bit with this. Next slide, please. On improvements, we abut existing public rights-of-way and public utilities. We're an infill site. Any of the upgrades that are necessary, sewer, water, sidewalks, obviously, those have to be borne by the developer. Improves pedestrian safety and safe routes to school with the sidewalks, and conforms to the zoning designation. On site suitability, we are listed in the slope analysis map and development suitability map. We are in the most developable area as considered by the Washoe County Code and the regional plan. This was reviewed quite extensively under the master plan and zone change. Looking at this for apartments, and when they went to their legal findings, they really went to a lot of legal findings that were for affordable housing. We're in proximity to school, transit services, and employment opportunities. And the actual distance of the building lines from building to building to the neighbors is greater than what the requirements would be by following minimum setbacks. Next slide, please. The traffic was not determined to be detrimental. This is the issuance not detrimental finding that needs to be made. That was one of the bigger questions, was relative to traffic. Setbacks are greater than what the zoning requires. This will hinder illegal dumping. Anytime you do development, it's kind of weird. It doesn't provide that opportunity in an area that you can start to keep legally dumping or illegally dumping. Improves drainage and improves pedestrian safety. The military installation, we don't have anything close. Next slide, which I think is our last slide. We are in agreement with staff's recommendation and the findings, and additionally those additional and the changed conditions that they presented. We do stand available for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you so much. Madam Secretary, do you have any comments? Public comment?
I have no public comment in chambers.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Great. Well, let's bring it back to the board then. Do we have any questions for staff or the applicant? Yes? Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, could you come back up and maybe answer this for me? As I understand it, in 2015, the Planning Commission changed this from what it was. Suburban residential, urban residential, according to the master plan, and public, semi-public facility to medium density urban.
That's
And
correct.
that was in 2015. I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe I can get some help from somewhere else, but was that done specific so they could build a project like this on that property? Is that the reason for planning making that change or altering the master plan?
That is my understanding.
Yeah, if I
Trevor.
could, thank you. And through the chair, thank you, Board Member Thomas, for your question. And again, this is several years back. I was not the case planner on the project, but from memory, it was to accommodate a higher intensity and density development specifically on that site, yes.
And at that time for the planning, they would have taken input from the community too, I would assume?
Yes, significant input, yeah.
Thank you. And one other question I have is, according to the traffic plan of 1,464 trips per day, if you spread that out over 24 hours, that's 61 trips an hour. That's a trip every minute. And that's 24/7. That's at 3 in the morning, people are leaving every minute from that place. So obviously, I'm a little bit surprised that traffic said it's really not an issue when they list this many trips and just what the average would come out to, considering probably where most of the time people would be traveling during daylight hours or within a certain period, 12 hours, maybe up to 16-hour period. So I'm a little bit surprised that the traffic came out with that type figure on that, especially when we're only 650 feet from the actual main thoroughfare that's out there. So was that traffic analysis done by NDOT, or was that done by a private company?
The traffic analysis, the traffic plan that was submitted as part of this application was done by Headway Transportation, which is a private company. But NDOT and RTC both did review the traffic study, and based off of that traffic study, determined that no improvements would be needed at the intersection, nor would it impact level of service at that intersection.
Okay, and lastly, this is just a statement. There's only one entrance in and out of that facility, correct? I believe there's a back gated area, but the main ingress, egress will be out of onto First.
Yeah, what we tried to do with the design on that is we have one entrance, we have a secondary gated access. Trying to get this to line up with four-way intersections, we line up with sagebrush, which is right across the way, so it creates a four-way intersection rather than being a little askew. If you, there's probably a little better map that might show the site plan with, yeah, where we come out, the one on the left-hand side, that's directly across from an existing residential street. In making grades work and trying to get an access that would match up with the other street, it was just too close. You know, or it set it up as an askew intersection, which isn't necessarily the safest thing because you can get some confusion there. So we have that as a secondary gated emergency access, and we would have the one point of access that everyone would go in and out of on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob, do you have any questions, or?
No, it sounds like a pretty straightforward project, and I'm in support of it.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. This isn't a question, it's a statement. Thank you very much for having the ad hoc community meeting. Thank you for paying attention and showing how you paid attention to some of the concerns. I think all of us here appreciate that.
Okay, are we ready to make a motion then? Someone?
This is Rob. I'll make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustments approve administrative permit case number WAD MIN 21-0009 for Ulysses Development Group LLC with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Development Code Section 110.808.25, and that's consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effects on military installation.
Madam Chair?
Matt,
Yes?
there was a recommendation for a condition change. Do we want
Yes.
to put that in?
So I'd just like to clarify with Mr. Pierce, there has been a recommendation from staff to add an additional condition regarding landscaping in between retaining walls, and that was on the PowerPoint. And then there's also been a recommendation from staff to replace condition 8A and 8B with the conditions that were presented in the PowerPoint. And so my question is if you would like to amend your motion to include those or not.
Yes, I would like to amend my motion to add the additional requirements or recommendations that the board or that the county planners have added to this.
Okay. Thank you. Those include vegetation between the retaining walls and whatever the other one is.
Yeah, I know, it's hard.
Do you want to?
The vegetation, yeah, the vegetation between the retaining walls in 8A and 8B, as they stated in their information that was given.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, the transportation conditions. Okay, do we have a second? Mr. Stanley seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay.
Just want to thank the board. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, the next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 21-0007, Hidden Valley Reclaimed Water Tank. Chris?
Sorry, let me fix that. There you go.
Good afternoon. Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. So we're looking at WSUP 21-7. This is the Hidden Valley Reclaimed Water Tank. For some reason, sorry. So this project is located within the existing Hidden Valley Regional Park. So the request is specifically to allow for a 1 million gallon water tank. There's been some confusion with reading this application, and I wanted to clarify. Within the site selection memo that is part of the exhibits, there's mentions of 1.4 million gallon for a water tank proposal. That has been reduced. The official application request is for 1 million gallons. And so as part of this request, it triggers significant major grading thresholds. Those thresholds are grading of an area more than 4 acres, grading of more than 2 acres on slopes 15% or greater, excavation of 1,000 cubic yards or more on slopes of 15% or greater, and then again, importation of 1,000 cubic yards or more on slopes of 15% or greater. Next slide, please. As part of this request, the applicant is requesting to vary grading standards as well. Those standards that are being requested to be varied or waived are landscaping requirements. So our code would require landscaping to be found around disturbed areas and new developed areas. Additionally, they are requesting to vary standards to allow for slopes greater than 3:1 and grading to vary more than 10 foot in elevation. With this, that's specific to allow for 32-foot tall retaining walls. In addition to that, the applicant is also requesting to vary modifiers found in Article 212. Those modifiers are specific to the Hidden Valley area, and they're also to allow for slopes greater than 3:1, grading to vary more than 10 foot in elevation, and to allow retaining walls greater than 8 feet in elevation. So here's the site plan close-up of the tank. As you can see on the southwest area, you'll see the 32-foot wall head to a 30-foot wall, and as it tapers down from there to much lower retaining wall heights. On the opposite side, the tallest retaining wall is 12.5 feet. Next slide, please. So as part of this request, staff did work with our Parks Division on the landscaping requirement. With the landscaping, ornamental landscaping would be required. This isn't desirable to park staff, nor is it desirable to planning staff that reviewed this. Instead, the applicant is going to be required to revegetate all disturbed areas and provide temporary irrigation to these revegetated locations to make sure that these seed mixes establish. So staff is supportive of the applicant's proposal and request of the varied standards of 3-to-1 and retaining walls greater than 8 feet. The reason being is if the applicant was required to meet these standards, the majority of that mountain would be scarred, it would be cut. You would have 3-to-1 slopes as well as numerous retaining walls and terraces all the way up. With this varied request, it significantly reduces the amount of scarring and disturbance that will take place while allowing the majority of the tank to be shielded from view. So this is a cut slope image. As you can see, there is significant cut that is going to be taking place, significant grading all around. There is one thing to be aware of with this request. If you look at the tank and then you look to the right, you'll see very steep cut slopes. That is bedrock cut, and that is roughly 45 feet above where the top of the tank will be. Next slide, please. So this project was noticed to 223 affected property owners within 500 feet, and staff did receive numerous phone calls and emails related to this project. Almost all of those were not supportive of the project. The primary concerns were related to visual impacts, impacts on the trails, impacts on the park. We also did receive public comment as early as this morning related to this project. And I believe that public comment was provided to you before the meeting. Next slide, please. So staff is recommending approval with conditions for this application. I've provided a possible motion above, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Is the applicant available for presentation?
Good afternoon. Let me take this off. For the record, Mike Rayleigh with Christie Corporation, representing Washoe County. If we can get that presentation. Next slide, please. Some of these first slides are a little repetitive to Chris's presentation. I think he did a great job. This just gives you the location map, obviously, within the Hidden Valley Regional Park. Next slide. Chris did a great job going through the actual request, so I'll spare you the repeat of that. But this is an overall kind of map of the park and how the tank site relates to the existing facilities. So there on the north, you'll see the existing developed equestrian center within the park itself, and then there are 2 existing tanks in the park, and then you'll see our tank is kind of set in that little saddle, so to speak, just to the south of the existing tanks. Next slide. These are some pictures taken from within the park itself of where the tank will be located. Next slide. And then that's our overall site plan showing the access road coming up from the existing internal dirt loop road up to the tank itself. Next slide. So as Chris went over, there really, it sounds fairly complicated to a layman of all these requests that we're asking for on the grading, but really what these deviations are to reduce the amount of scarring. So as Chris mentioned, doing 3 and 4-to-1 slopes above the tank would literally take down the mountain. Water tanks obviously have to be at a higher elevation. They're usually on hillsides, and so that's why the code allows for these provisions to vary those standards in unique circumstances like this. So next slide. Once again, this is a 1 million gallon reclaimed water tank, not a 1.4, just to clarify. The tank's needed for irrigation of park facilities, the Hidden Valley Golf Course, and for a proposed rapid infiltration basin and park wetland improvements. And the use of the reclaimed water will allow for potable water currently being used within the park to be reserved and reallocated for other municipal purposes. So it really has quite a few benefits from a public standpoint. The site was chosen based on the availability to connect with existing infrastructure and reduce those visual impacts that I mentioned earlier. And I think it's also important to note a lot of the public comment was obviously from the residents to the neighborhood directly to the west, and the closest resident to the site is about 1,800 feet. So it really is a good distance away from those existing homes. Next slide. The grading and the deviations being requested will greatly reduce the amount of disturbance and scarring. Everything will be completely revegetated. And I think at the end of the day, combined with the color of the tank, will really help to have it blend much better than some of the other tanks that you see in the region. The views from the homes, we were not blocking views to the mountains. The tank sits there, but those homes will still enjoy this basically the same view that they have today. The tank will also be partially buried, which will also help with mitigate those. The trails within the park will remain open. We'll have a slight detour of one of the trails during construction, but this will not impact any of the trails or the future use of those trails. And as mentioned earlier, the total disturbed area is just right around 2.5 acres, of which 1.6 will be revegetated, the area that's outside of the tank itself. Next slide. Some specifications on the tank: it's 77 feet in diameter and about 36.5 feet tall. It's a pre-stressed concrete tank that will actually be constructed on site. It's not a metal tank. And the retaining wall will be constructed along the sides and the rear of the tank, which also helps to reduce that hillside scarring. So as part of this, we work pretty closely with Sophia and planning staff, Sophia with Parks Department and planning staff, to do some photo simulations of what the tank will look like. So what you see there is actually a map of Hidden Valley Park. And if you look at those little yellow circles that say A, B, C, D, and E, that's where the photo sims were taken from. So the first one being right there at the Horsemen's Arena, the second B being taken at the existing residences to the west, C at the developed park facilities on the south, and then D and E along the existing trail systems within the park. Next slide. So this is from the Horsemen's Arena. You can see the tank. Obviously it's visible, but it really does kind of blend, and it gives you kind of a perspective of how high on the hill the tank is. And it also outlines the area that will be disturbed and revegetated. Next slide. So this is taken from Site B, which is along the western property boundary of the park and the existing homes. And as you can see, the area that's outlined will be disturbed with the process, but then returned with native vegetation. And the grading that we're proposing would allow that to be essentially match the existing current grade, so it creates a natural transition up to the tank. So from the south, where the developed park facilities, the tank is not visible at all. It's hidden by the intervening ridge. So that's an easy one. Next slide. So this is within the park itself, the trail system. This gives you a little bit more of a close-up view of what the tank will look like. And once again, you'll see that area that's outlined, the area that will be revegetated in the post-construction phase. Next slide. And this is taken basically just to the north of the tank site along the existing trail, really where it would be most visible, in my opinion. And this, you can see how the retaining wall comes in there, and then the area that's going to be disturbed. And that also shows that native bedrock slope that Chris mentioned in his presentation. And this also, lastly, gives you an idea of how that tank is partially buried into the side of the hill. Next slide. The tank location and design went to the Parks and Open Space Commission twice, and they recommended approval. The CAB also recommended approval of the project. It does provide a public benefit. It does not conflict with the existing amenities within the parks, including the trails, and allows for that potable water to be reserved and reallocated for municipal purposes. So it has several benefits to the project. Next slide. So we do have the entire project team here. Scott Benedict with SB Engineering, Doug Buck with Christie Corporation is attending via Zoom, Alan Jones and Dwayne Smith with Capital Engineering and Capital Projects, and Sophia with Washoe County Parks is also in attendance to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment?
Yes, I have Edward Vahorn.
Good afternoon. My name's Ed V. Horn, and I live on 5790 Lone Horse Drive. My wife and I's house is directly west of the tank proposal. It's on our east elevation. We'll be looking directly at that tank. We've been there for 31 years in that area. It's been a great place to live. My question would be the location of the tank. The tank elevation, bottom elevation, I think is going to be at 4780. I know the existing tanks that are out there right now are 4700. There's an area behind the tanks, and the question that I have is, why couldn't this tank be located in that area where the existing water tanks are right now? There's quite a bit of area in that area. I shot some elevations myself with my own GPS, and the elevations come in at 4730. Our house's elevation is at 4550. So that's about 230 feet difference in elevation where this tank proposal is going to be. And I was told by several other people that this tank will be visible to hardly anybody in the community of Hidden Valley. But if you go up and you stand at that location, probably 70% of the people will be able to see that tank, whether from their front door or from their back door. My question would be, why can't that thing be located where the other tanks are? And then I pulled this off your website. And then the other question I had would be the infrastructure. I see a 24-inch water line coming in to feed this tank. I don't see any infrastructure coming out of how it's going to service the existing parks, whether it's going to be on the north side or the south side. So, and I understand this is going to be a single-phase project. If that's the case, where's the water infrastructure? Where's that going to be? How are you going to get the water out of this tank to service, number one, the golf course, I guess, if that's going to happen, or the parks to the north and south. The other thing I did look at is the access road. Now, where the other existing tanks are and the area there is already an access road there. You won't need another access road for this tank if you do build it there. I think the cuts are going to be very major, and I think they're going to be very visible. I know the design team here, it looks like they're doing a pretty good job to try to hide this thing, but it's going to be visible, and I really can't understand why we want to go in there and scar that mountainside up anymore. It already is. That's pretty much all I have. The other thing, actually, I said one more thing. I was issued this Hidden Valley Master Plan from 1990, and my question to the county is: are we going to see any other deviances? Are we going to go away from anything else from this park? It's a nice park, but I really don't want to see anything else changed out there if we can possibly have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional public comment?
Madam Chair, I did have a hand raised via Zoom. I saw it go down. I just want to allow for one more moment. If we had any public comment via Zoom, if you could please raise your hand. Okay. I do have Earl. I'm going to allow you to speak. If you could please state your first and last name for the record. And you'll need to unmute.
My name is Earl Housley.
Thank you. We can hear you, Earl. You may go ahead.
I'm Ed V. Horn's next door neighbor, and he did a good job. Like Ed, I'm going to look at this thing. I'm looking at it right now. It's going to scar this mountain, and we get to live through all the construction and the vibration of the excavation. And I understand the project concept, and I agree with it. I just don't know why the residents of Hidden Valley have to bear the burden when this is going to benefit a golf course, maybe the Nevada farmlands, free up water rights for all of these entities to sell at our expense. I want to thank Chris for clearing up the 1.4 million gallons issue that I brought up to him. When I went through your materials, it talks about where tanks can be located and where they can't. And it says that tanks can't be located in open space or near trails. And Hidden Valley is all open space and near trails. I don't know how you get around that. That's what it is here. And that's why we all enjoy it. That's why all the people come out here every day with their dogs and jog and bike. And now you're going to mix construction equipment with it. I just don't understand that. And I don't, like Ed, I don't see where the water's going out. I don't know how you're going to get it to the farmlands. You're going to get it to any of the other parks, the golf course. I mean, you're not showing where that's at, and I'm assuming that's got to go through this community as well. I understand the existing code and I understand the requested variances, but it appears when you waive those, they're open-ended. I don't know that you can put some parameters on some of those things or not. Lots of comments in all of the 125 pages. Missing is any comment from an HOA or a CAB. I understand you may not have to go out to them for this project. In my years of raising kids and coaching little kids, one of the things I've always told them is do the right thing when no one's looking. So I don't know why you wouldn't go to the homeowners association or the CAB and get their comments. If this were to happen and you were to revegetate, it would be nice if you would get some of the citizens involved. I mean, revegetate is a pretty open term. And, you know, there's pine trees up there now, pinyon pines, and I don't know whether you plan on putting mature pinyon pines around it or what would happen. I don't even think there's a plan. But anyway, in summation, I disapprove of this SUP. I don't know how you can approve it in this open space, and you're going to continue to scar it and have to go back into it. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Chris, for returning all my calls and et cetera.
Thank you, Earl.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I have no further public comment via Zoom.
Okay. Let's bring it back to the board. I think we have some questions for probably the applicant. Maybe, well, I have a question. How is the water going to be distributed to the golf course?
What's that? Put your presentation on this, got
Can we get the slide back up with the
Yeah,
aerial?
just one moment.
Good afternoon, Council. Scott Benedict, SB Engineering, for the record. Your question is regarding how it's going to serve the golf course or
Yeah.
the park? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Well, you said it's going to, the purpose of the tank is to provide water for the Hidden Valley Country Club Golf Course and future park, but how are you going to get the water from the tank to the golf course?
Well, the water is coming from the South Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. There's a main right now that's being constructed in Alexander Lake Road. That main's going to cross Steamboat Creek, and it's going to work its way up to Reno Highlands Drive. At Reno Highlands Drive, the main's going to, split. It's going to go east towards the tank in the park, and there's going to be another main that's going to, I think it's a 14-inch main, that's going to extend towards the Hidden Valley Golf Course, and it's going to get over there to West Hidden Valley Drive. And I forget what hole it is. I think it's the 15th, where that par 5 is. I mean, the plan is to bring it into the golf course there and then route it to their existing pond near the clubhouse.
So isn't those mains that you call them, or distribution lines, going to be part of this project?
Not to the golf course. I mean, right now we're talking about just getting the transmission mains and the storage tank constructed. And then, because right now without the storage tank, it's really difficult can't really serve the golf course because we need a little bit of water to come out of the tank as well as a little bit of pumping.
So as part of this project, we're going to get it, the transmission mains and the tank constructed, and then at a later phase, the golf course is going to come on board, from my understanding.
How long is this phase of construction going to last?
Well, right now, once we got to get this permit and then BLM, I mean, once the actual construction starts for the transmission main and the tank, it's probably going to be about, 8 months, 8 months to 10 months for actual construction, depending on how we phase it. And we can do things with the schedule, or we can tighten things up with multiple crews. I mean, they can do the transmission main and potentially the tank simultaneously. It depends on how much time we want to give the contractor. I mean, if we give the contractor more time, it's going to cost less, it just depends on how we want to push it.
Is there a condition for dust control?
Yes, there will be.
Okay.
That'll be per the Washoe County requirements. There'll be,
And the landscaping, is it going to be native landscaping?
correct.
Is
There'll be a
that
stormwater.
specifically mentioned?
Correct. We'll have
Okay.
to get a stormwater permit for that, and that'll be governed by NDEP. We'll need to bring things back to 80%. Prior to
Was
that.
there any selection process as to why you didn't put it with the other tanks that are there?
Absolutely. I mean, those other tanks they're for the potable system, and they're at what's called a different hydraulic grade line, different pressure. They serve the homes immediately, to the west. The hydraulic grade line of the reclaim system's a little bit higher, actually quite a bit higher, so that they're two different pressure zones. So we can reg down to that zone, but to actually backfeed from the tank and provide pressures, to the customers on the reclaim system, this tank's at a higher hydraulic grade line. And to some extent, the tank's location elevation is a function of the current pumping that's at the treatment plant. That's basically what dictates where the tank goes. It's based on the size of the pumps.
Gravity flow?
No, we're pumping it from the treatment plant. There's pumps there, vertical turbines, that take it to this elevation. And
How
from that
far away is the treatment plant?
What's the capacity of your treatment? Is it? Oh, how far away? Oh, how far away miles-wise? Well, about 6 miles.
Wow.
It'd be 6 miles to the southwest.
So there's going to be pipes from 6 miles away pumping water into this tank?
Correct, yes.
And that's not part of this project?
Yes, it is for I mean, yeah.
I mean, this is just construction of the tank.
This is just for the special use permit is just for the construction of the tank and the pipeline within the park. Phase 1 is going on right now. That's the transmission main that's going from the treatment plant to the intersection of Alexander Lake Road and Veterans Parkway. That's the transmission main that's getting constructed now. Phase 2 is the transmission main from that location to the tank. And as part of that Phase 2 project, we're calling Hidden Valley Phase 2, you've got the tank within the park and the transmission main within the park. Yeah, there's a couple different phases to this. I mean, and then I believe that Phase 3 would be the golf course, and potentially Phase 4 is going to be.
Yeah, it's hard to understand the whole project when you're just looking at a tank.
Correct,
And you're not seeing, the purpose of it is to irrigate the golf course. Well, then how are you going to get the water there to the golf course? How's it going to get from the reclamation, process to the tank? It's just
Oh,
kind
yeah,
of
this is just one component
and
of.
why isn't it in an area that is less offensive to the neighbors? And can't you put it near the other tanks but higher up?
The topography there is probably more visible than where we have it
No.
now. I mean, because then you get into issues with access roads. I mean, we looked at putting it, on the ridge above that park to the south, and then to cut an access road up there at 8%, you wind up making a very big scar. I mean, that in itself could be a big of a detriment.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. I'd like to follow along kind of your line of questioning, if you don't mind, piggyback on that. There, from what I'm hearing, then there are 3 phases, is that you kind of know about?
Yeah, there's, well, potentially 4. I mean, then
Okay, four
the
phases.
expansion area behind phase 3 would be potentially to connect to, I don't know, hey, Alan, do you want to talk about phase 4? Yeah, phase 4. If we want to tag me, you and our.
Yeah, so Alan Jones, for the record, Washoe County Community Services Department. It's important that we put some context to this, to your question of why we're building a tank out there, to both of you.
If you don't mind, my question to the gentleman that preceded you was, there are 4 phases?
Yes.
All right, and roughly what elapsed time are you kind of guesstimating for those phases?
So there's no real timing on all the phases, and it all depending on how things go. So for context, the county runs the South Meadows South Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. It's a zero discharge facility, which means all our reclaim, you've probably heard the story before, I've been here before, about sending it out to the system. So as the plant expands, we have to find locations to put this reclaimed water to beneficial use. That's what I always say is beneficial use. One of those places is Hidden Valley. It's a good place to set for beneficial use. So the need for the tank is to get the water to the tank and to be able to feed Hidden Valley Park, hopefully Hidden Valley Golf Course. That's not a for sure thing. And the 4th phase is in there. It says tie into the city of Reno reclaim system. So for the county, this is a big project, many phases. It's planned out. We've been planning this for 4 years. It's in essence on how we're required as the treatment plant's expanding is to make sure we have good places to send it. And this is only one of our projects we're looking at. So I hope that helps.
One of the projects you're looking at, are you looking at alternatives or?
Well, I would say alternatives. I would tell you it's very challenging finding locations for irrigation for reclaimed water. So we have to look other places too. Okay, we're looking to South Reno. We're looking, lots of places. So and this is one of our projects. It's a big project for the county, obviously. One thing I would tell you, when the county had the water system, we had many water tanks out there. And I understand the concern about water tanks, how ugly they are, disturbance they show. And I will tell you, we put significant amount of effort to hide the tank. We looked at alternatives where we had 2 tanks, a 500,000 gallon tank, another 500,000 gallon tank, and the scars were big, very big. So we looked at it, and I will tell you the concrete tank that's buried, the retaining walls and all those things we're adding, adds a lot of cost to the project. But, the county, we believe that Hidden Valley Park is an important thing, an important element to the area. And making sure we can do as much as we can, it's obvious we can't do everything to make it perfect, but we feel we've done enough to it to at least do as little disturbance as we can.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
So, Mr. Jones, just help me work my way through this. So we have a reclamation plant that is going to pump the water ultimately to the tank. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the tank is going to have irrigation that at this point in time is going to facilitate the landscape for Hidden Valley Park.
Yes.
Okay. If the tank is approved right now and is built, is the infrastructure in place at this time from the reclamation plant to get water to the tank?
No, to Scott's point, so this special use permit is just for the tank.
Right.
But when we bid the project and build the whole project, this phase 2 we're talking, will include all transmission main going from the terminus where phase 1 ended, which is on Alexander Lake Road, and really close to where Veterans Parkway is right there. We kind of ended it right there. That was our first phase. That just actually got completed last month. The next phase 2 will include all the transmission main all the way to the park and and at the same time, we're gonna bring a line you asked about. There will be a line and we'll tie it into the existing irrigation system at the northern portion of the park and the southern portion. So as part of the requirements for this, we've worked a lot with parks. These are some of the things they like to see, so we've dealt with them a lot. We've hand in hand, as right now we're going through, we've just started a master plan update for the park. We're helping with that because, you know, the needs and the use of reclaimed water, I feel is beneficial, it's helpful, it's where it needs to go, is irrigation and beneficial to the community, so. But yeah, it's the second phase builds everything we need to fill the tank.
Madam Chair, if I could, just want to caution the board, we are looking at only the request before us, not all the phases of the project. That's going to have to go through a different set of permitting. But what we're looking
Right.
at today is simply the construction of the tank on this site.
I know, but it's kind of hard to get a grasp of the impacts of a tank when you're not looking at how that tank is going to be utilized and how it's going to be, in the future, going to
Understood.
need these additional improvements to function.
Understood.
So, anyway, that's my thought on that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
No, Mr. Lloyd, thank you for that. You are correct, you know, that we are here talking about the tank, and I understand that. And I guess I would just hate to think that if we okay the tank, but yet it's never approved for the infrastructure to get the water to the tank, you've got a big monolith sitting there that, you know, and I'm not saying that would happen, but it's kind of a, to me, there's an order process, and we've kind of put item D in front of, you know, C here, but I get that.
Yeah, I can tell you that we won't build a tank unless we have the approvals. You're right, we're going through a BLM, essentially right of entry or easement approval. And we've been told by staff that it's not gonna be a problem, but you know how things work. But that is a problem. That's why, in reality, we're not gonna probably start construction until next summer because of the BLM grant, but that's part of the process. So we will not build the main, we will not build a tank unless obviously we have the main approved. I can tell you that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Just another question. Thank you, Ms. Jones. I'm off that topic for the moment. I do agree that, you know, a water tank sitting out there, and I think, to be honest with you, I think the engineers have done a great job in attempting to put it at a location far enough away where it's really not as close to the residential area and becomes unsightful. And I think it is backed up into that draw there pretty well. But looking at the pictures that I have here in front of me, I've also noticed that the tank will be visible from certain angles from the community. And we are talking about revegetation of some of that area. And I had a conversation today, and make sure I can get this right, with Ms. Kirscherman, the park planner. And what our discussion is in order to help mitigate the circumstances of the site from the community, to add maybe some additional actual trees, the pinyon pines, or Jeffrey, whatever they are, whatever the natural vegetation is there that could be put along the ridge line, and add some trees basically to the top of that. So when you're looking at it, because when you look at your photos, there are clumps of trees, and then you'll have a scar with a tank behind it. Now, I believe, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I believe we've come to an agreement, Ms. Kirschman and I, that Parks is willing to take that into consideration and possibly assist with mitigating the view of that tank through the use of some of the natural vegetation, i.e. some of the trees.
Yeah, I will tell you that Sophia and I have worked a lot together for this project, and if that's something that Parks would like to see, I'm not objected to that. The original discussion was like regular landscaping, like you would see around the subdivision stuff, would even make the tank even show up more. So if it's something that's aesthetic and makes it look nice and makes it blend in better, then I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Kirschman, can you just come up and confirm our conversation, make sure we're all on the same page here if we make an adjustment to the conditions for this project?
Absolutely. Sophia Kirshenman, Park Planner with Washoe County Planning for the record. Yes, we did have a discussion this morning to talk a little bit more about what would potentially be required in that revegetation plan. It is a condition of approval from Parks that they do submit a full revegetation plan that would detail, native species selection, monitoring provisions, the whole 9 yards. Since it's in a park, we want to make sure that it looks nice, that revegetation actually gets established. I did have a discussion earlier today with our Operations Division Director, Eric Crump, and we talked about the existing vegetation on site. We both agreed that there are a number of pinyon junipers that are right at that same elevation of where the tank is proposed to be, and that we are supportive of having some of that additional native vegetation kind of included as part of the revegetation plan requirements. Any trees that are currently found at that elevation would not require additional maintenance from staff in the long term. So the only concerns that we really have from a parks perspective is ensuring that we don't plant trees that don't naturally survive at that elevation, because that would require long-term permanent irrigation. And that's just something that, would put sort of the onus on park staff to maintain that in the long run.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stanley?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for pursuing that. So are you thinking that these are going to be single-leaf pinyon pines then with some junipers, or, because that is what as you know, that's what's there. I understand at least a decade or so ago that those are extremely difficult to get in a mature form. And they take roughly, 125 years to become mature? So it's a great idea, and it would very much improve, I think, the sight lines or the sight picture of the tank. But what, if you don't mind me asking, are the mechanics, what mechanics do you foresee to get this done in terms of getting the trees in, placement, keeping them watered during the time when they are most vulnerable, and that sort of thing?
I think for that, I would really look to our natural resources planner to provide some recommendations. Typically, for park properties, we require more than we would require anywhere else in terms of the revegetation plan. So we do photo point monitoring, for an example, where we go out there, they have to take pictures ahead of time, say, okay, this is what it looks like now, and then provide monitoring reports for a couple of years until that revegetation is at least established enough to where it's no longer going to need irrigation. For this particular location, you're right that these pinyons and junipers are difficult to get established. So I think it would just be having to have the temporary irrigation on site, at least for several years, to get that really to a point where they could survive in our drought conditions. They do thrive in drought conditions, oddly enough. So I think once they were established, they would continue to grow and thrive.
Okay, and if I may follow on to that. So temporary could be, and by the way, from my standpoint, this is fine. And I think it's a great idea to get the additional natural. I guess that would make them non-ornamental, because the ornamental seemed to be the thing that everybody was concerned with, which would be like putting a Jeff pine there or something. So these would be non-ornamental, is that correct?
That's correct. It would just be native vegetation there.
All right.
From a parks perspective, we think that the native vegetation would just make it blend better and be more well hidden. Having a row of trees makes it actually kind of stand out more when you're looking that direction. You just see a row of trees and you're kind of called to that direction. So
Absolutely
native
agreed.
vegetation seems better.
And this may not be within your purview, but I know that some of the things that you've worked on that I'm kind of aware of impinge on this. There was a mention about BLM. Has there been any discussion, or need there be, or with NDA, who, as you know, for the time being, has stewardship of some of the larger animals out there?
Yeah, so in terms, a couple of different pieces there. So the Hidden Valley Regional Park is on a Recreation and Public Purposes Act patent from the BLM. Those were acquired in the 1960s. And that basically means that whatever we do at the park will always have to be in conformance with that RMPP legislation. We've had some preliminary discussions with the BLM just to say, okay, is this something that you would support? And generally speaking, as long as the infrastructure would provide a public benefit to the park, it's supported. If it were just a tank that was going to serve, the neighboring community and not actually provide irrigation to the park, then that would likely not be approved. We haven't submitted the actual application to the BLM yet, kind of waiting upon this approval to do so and then actually submit those plans. And then at that point, they would weigh in and make sure that this is in conformance with that as well.
Thank you.
And-
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. I don't know, Chris or Trevor. Are they're varying different things? Does that mean this is kind of a variance as well? Or is this just a special use permit where you're varying the standards?
So this is a special use permit. The special use permit does include the tank itself as well as the infrastructure within the park boundary. As part of a special use permit, the applicants can request to vary or modify standards.
And that doesn't have to be a variance.
That does not trigger a variance as it's allowed by the SUP process.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yes? Yes. I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
She can do what she wants.
Just a couple of things I'd like to add. I know the wild horse population is all around that area.
Pardon me?
The wild horse population is pretty much in that area. And I think on the website I looked, I think the tank probably after completion will have to be fenced. I think there was something to that to keep it protected from the general public and also probably from the wild horses. And then the other thing, going back to my experience, I've been in the construction industry for 44 years in this town. And I worked for some very prominent contractors that probably everybody in this room knows. But when we always come in front with to have a job presented, we always had a built-in schedule. Whether it's 1 phase or 4 phases or 5 phases. We always had the schedule ready to go. So we can present that to the people who are going to approve these projects. I hear, first I see 1 phase, now I hear 4 phases. But the infrastructure's got to be cut across that park. They're going to come across there with a 24-inch line. It'd be nice to see the drawings on where the rest of this infrastructure is going to go to feed the north side of that, of the park and the south side. And is 1 million gallons of water, is that how much water is going to go to that park? Or is it going to be distributed elsewhere? I don't have a problem with using the reclaimed water. But going back to the location where the other tanks are, I walked that area and I looked at it. There's access road already to those existing tanks. And without cutting in a new road to the proposed tank, from my experience looking at the elevations, I think there's plenty of room to put that tank back there where those other tanks are. And you're gonna have, those tanks are gonna be isolated. You're gonna have your potable water and you're gonna have your grade A water. There's probably no way you're gonna get those mixed up. And you're probably only looking maybe less than a quarter of a mile from taking that tank where everybody in that hidden valley is gonna see it and scarring up that mountainside and tucking it back in there where the other 2 tanks are at. So I just want to add that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
since the chair has reopened public comment for one member, you do need to reopen public comment for any other people to speak again. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other public comment?
I have no public comment in chambers.
Okay.
Good afternoon,
Are
everybody.
you considered public comment?
Under public comment, I just wanted to say a couple of things for the record. My name is Dwayne Smith. I'm the Director of Engineering for Washoe County, and certainly want to thank the team, and I want to thank the public as well, because I know that this process of identifying these infrastructure needs is never easy. And ultimately, the infrastructure is a piece of it, but the overall benefit is really what we're trying to solve here. So I really do appreciate the fact that we're willing to commit to a lot of additional elements as opposed to some of the other previous projects that have built tanks up on the hillsides. And honestly, some of those look really bad. And so I really do want want to thank everybody in the public, because I think it's important for the public to know that we're listening to them and to make sure that we do. Let me say it like this. Cost is always a consideration. We are responsible to the utility ratepayers of Washoe County to spend those dollars effectively. But we also have a responsibility to the public, so that in this case, we're willing to spend those extra dollars to put a pre-stressed concrete tank in the ground, to put the additional retaining walls and hide these scars as much as possible, to ask our planning staff to give us some variance on those slopes so that we know that they're safe, sustainable, and it mitigates that visual impact. So we're definitely willing to do that and appreciate that. We will want to continue to work with our public, because I get it. I'm a homeowner too. I don't want to see things right up behind my house. But unfortunately, because the hydraulic grade line of this tank is necessary to be approximately 80 feet higher, it doesn't work if it's at the same elevation as the other tanks. So those were certainly considerations that the design team went through and looked at. But I want to certainly make sure that we're clear that there were certainly considerations to look for alternatives for this. So I just wanted to take a minute. Thank you for opening up public comment once again, just to give us an opportunity or give me the opportunity to express, what we're trying to accomplish here. And it is a larger benefit. I think Mike mentioned that this project is more than just bringing water to a golf course or to an irrigated area of the park or these other things. It really is all of that and more. And it also helps us preserve potable water resources and manage those in more effective ways moving forward. So our goal with the reclaimed water system in the South Truckee Meadows is always resiliency and sustainability. So the more we use reclaimed water, the more potable water we can save. Keep it in the river, keep it in the ground. That's really the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have a hand raised via Zoom. Earl, I'm going to allow you to talk. Again, if you could just state your first and last name for the record.
Yeah, Earl Housley.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that we ought to be looking at everything that's going on, because there are going to be some things that happen down the road we're going to have to deal with again. I've run a lot of businesses in this town, and I've never gone to a meeting where I had a staff present me one thing at a time. We put the package together. One thing I can tell you from my years of experience is there's money in confusion, and I see a little bit of confusion here. And that's really all I have to say. I think they've done a good job of what they're doing, but why we're going 6 miles away is beyond me. There's got to be another option. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
I have no further public comment via Zoom.
What? I think you need to fill out a form or something.
Yes,
You can
after
do that.
public comment, you can.
Yeah.
My name's Douglas Barker, here for another project. I just wanted to point out that you have the county's engineers here requesting special use permit that is mostly pertained to inefficiencies in the county's code. Almost all of this listed would be allowed in the city of Reno without special use permit. They would not need a hearing to be allowed to do so. I don't know their cuts and their fills. I haven't looked into this project, but I didn't see anything on there besides the 32-foot wall that would require voting in our bigger municipality next door. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Stanley?
Yes.
Madam Chair, do you want to close public comment?
Okay, we're going to close public comment now. And bring it back to the board?
Yes,
So-
thank you, and I do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm not sure to whom it should be addressed, but it has to do with scarring, grading, and remediation of that. So who can speak to that, please? And I think it has to do with technique as opposed to minimization of this. All right, thank you. You drew the short straw.
Yeah, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
I didn't get to it yet. So there's going to be some access roads. I noticed on, I think it's site view D that there's some scarring anticipated there. We know from previous projects, and I know from living out that way, that the grading there creates a, it's very light colored. So it's very easy to see where grading has taken place. Is there any plan, do you know, is there any process for remediation of the scarring? Obviously, you're going to minimize it with the best access roads and that sort of thing. But is there any remediation plan for reducing the visual impact of the very light-colored scarring in that area?
Yeah, the only really way you can mediate that is the revegetation, is to make sure you have a good plan, and we are going to temporarily irrigate that.
Right.
And that's the only real way you're going to make sure that comes back and to make it blend in. You're right. If you didn't vegetate it properly, then it would still look a scarf, like you said. So it's just good design, good plant mixtures that we're going to use that the parks recommends, and doing it properly. So, and then temporary irrigating it too for at least 2 or 3 years at least.
And so do I understand, if I may, that in addition to the cut for the tank itself, the access roads and so forth will also be addressed with that same treatment you're speaking of?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey, Rob, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, but thank you for asking.
Okay. Okay, if we have no more questions or comments, are we ready to make a motion?
Well, Madam Chair, before we do that, amongst our discussion amongst us is, I do take into account the concern of the neighbors in seeing a tank,
Yeah.
that they would have to look at. And living in this valley, I can pick out the different tanks that are exposed. My concern would be is if we put it back where the other tanks were, just on its face value, you'd start to look like you had a tank farm over there, especially if they went from $1 million to two, $500,000 tanks, you'd have at least 4 of them. You'd start to look like the Sparks area. I think it's already been stated as to why this tank has to be at a higher elevation and the location it has to go, and I do believe that the county has done a fairly good job of attempting to conceal it as best they can, and then following that up, Parks coming in behind that and working with the revegetation and adding the additional trees to mitigate that view that people may face. With that, my other question is to Mr. Lloyd, does there have to be an adjustment to the conditions, or since it says revegetation, and we've already discussed with Washoe County Parks that they will add the pinyon pines, does that need to be specifically addressed in a condition, or is that just part of a revegetation plan?
And through the chair, thank you, Mr. Thomas. If you want to be very specific about that condition, I would add that language directly to that condition.
Just to keep everybody above board, I guess. So, Madam Chair, what I'd recommend also before a motion is made, that when a motion is made, that under Washoe County Parks and Open Spaces, which is 2B, that it says prior to the issuance of a building or grading permit, a revegetation plan to include the planting of native trees shall be reviewed and approved by the Washoe County Parks.
Okay, sounds good.
Question for the board members here. We've oftentimes indicated there needs to be some boundaries around this. Are we content with leaving the number of trees open-ended and leave that to the experts, or what is our thinking there?
Every 20 feet or something, or?
To traditional code, non-ornamental and probably single leaf. Do we want to identify that or leave it open?
My advice, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Well, this is Rob. I just wanted to recommend that we leave that to the experts. Let them decide on that.
And I concur with that statement.
Yeah, we don't know.
Madam
Okay,
Chair?
so you're going to amend condition 2B to include the pinyon pine? Okay,
Yes, the planting of pinyon pines
right.
to mitigate the site issues that
Screen
have been
the,
addressed.
Madam Chair?
yes?
I would like to make a recommendation in the event this board or the person making the motion wants to approve the SUP. I didn't see some of the requested variances to the development standards in the conditions of approval specifically. So I would recommend that in the event you decide to go that way, that you add to the end of the motion that you're also approving the requested variances to the development code standards that staff has asked for, which would be landscaping and grading
Right,
variances.
that's why I kind of asked that question earlier.
Yeah,
I didn't,
I would recommend that that specifically be included in the motion in the
Okay.
event that's the way this board wants to go, that you would also move to approve the requested variances to the development standards related to the landscaping and grading, which I believe are listed on page 3 of the staff report.
okay.
And for the maker of the motion, I don't know that I would specify the particular tree type, just say native tree vegetation.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, I believe the maker of the motion mentioned pinyon pines. I don't know that I would mention a specific species, but it'd be native trees.
Yeah, I think the notion was there that that is, I believe it's recognized that that's the indigenous species there.
Okay. Someone ready to make a motion? I'll go ahead and give it a try. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 21007, 0007, and the variances from the landscaping and grading standards, and the inclusion of a modification to condition of approval 2B to include native tree species as part of the revegetation condition for the applicant, and the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110-810-30, including consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effect on a military installation. Do I have a second?
Does that work? Okay.
Second by Mr. Stanley. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is E, special use permit case number WSUP 21-0009 Cheyenne Drive. Chris Brosnick.
I apologize, can we ask people in the audience that are speaking to leave the, yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. We're looking at WSUP 21-9. This is Cheyenne Drive. So this is a request for major grading. The project itself includes 3,170 cubic yards of cut, 80 cubic yards of fill, and this is taking place on slopes greater than 15%. The request also disturbs 0.42 acres. As part of this request, the applicant is asking to vary standards. Those standards are setbacks. So under the regulatory zone for these parcels, the required front yard setback is 30 feet. The request is to reduce that setback to 10 feet. Additionally, there are grading standards that are going to be requested to be varied. Those grading standards that are going to be varied are allowing 10-foot retaining walls within the front yard setbacks and allowing fills up to 4.5 feet within the front yard setbacks. So I've provided a vicinity map. This is 3 parcels off of Cheyenne Drive, and it is adjacent to US 395, and Interstate 580 is to the north. So I provided a site plan. As you can see, the existing setbacks shown are for those 30-foot. We have curved driveways going in and leading to a building pad. Next slide. Attached is a close-up of the site plan. Again, you'll see the retaining walls to the north of that driveway, as well as the building pad. And again, it's showing that 30-foot setback and how into the setback this development would be. So it should be noted that this application came in originally earlier this year, and to the left is the previous site plan. And so what that previous site plan actually did was it extended a roadway from Cheyenne Drive to the back of these 3 proposed residences on these 3 parcels. In doing that, what it resulted in was significant retaining walls, significant amounts of grading, and overall, it was a development that didn't work with the existing topography. To the right, you see the current site plan and a significant reduction in overall disturbance. Next slide. So again, with the previous site plan, you'll see on the chart above that was provided to staff within the application. All the proposed cuts, fills, and even wall lengths. And with their current site plan set up, we see a total disturbance reduction of 0.88 acres, a total reduction in fill by 3,620 cubic yards, and a total reduction in wall length by 780 feet. However, in order for the applicant to receive these significant reductions, it also plays into that request for a reduction in the front yard setback. Due to the clear reduction in overall disturbance, staff does support the varied standard requests. Next slide, please. So notice was sent to 39 property owners within 1,000 feet of the project parcels. Next slide. So this project was presented to the May 6th South Truckee Meadows Washoe Valley CAB. The discussions that were presented at that CAB meeting were related to grading, specifically runoff, flood concerns, drainage, as well as the retaining walls associated with the original project. Additional concerns were related to modular or manufactured homes instead of stick-built homes, and the existing CCNRs that were on the property. The CAB did vote to deny the original proposal. As a result, the applicant did come back and do a redesign, which is what you are seeing before you today. So staff has received public comment in the form of emails and phone calls. Again, those concerns are related to the existing CCNRs, the fact that the applicant didn't acknowledge existing CCNRs in their original application, an incomplete plan, increased runoff related to the drainage, and decrease in value of current residences. Next slide, please. The following findings are consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effect on a military installation. Staff is able to make all the required findings for this project. Staff is recommending approval with conditions, and I've provided a possible motion for you above.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here for a presentation?
Good evening, Derek Kirkland with Wood Rogers, for the record, representing the applicant and property owner Doug Barker, who is also here with us. And I do have Michael Vicks with Monta Vista Consulting, who is a project engineer as well. Next slide, please. So just a little context on the existing parcels. So essentially, these parcels are existing mapped recorded lots. They do exist today. Cheyenne Drive runs basically just to the southeast of those parcels and was constructed to provide access to these existing parcels that have zoning basically to allow one unit on each of these final map lots. Next slide, please. The slopes are somewhat challenging for these existing parcels. And so what we've tried to do, and I'll get to the CAB piece in a little bit, we did go to the CAB and we did listen to them, and we've come back with a significantly different plan. And I think their comments were well received, and we went back to the drawing board, and sometimes you have to do that. And so for these lots, what we've done is try to really pull these lots forward. As you know, the slope basically runs kind of from the top of the lot down to Cheyenne Drive. Cheyenne Drive did create some challenges when they graded that to accessing the lots as well, and that's why the original plan we had to kind of go up above, and obviously didn't work as well as we had hoped. But coming back with this current plan, essentially, we're looking at each lot accessing off of that Cheyenne Drive, and that requires us to basically pull those lots forward so that we can stay out of the upper part of the slope. The further back that house pad goes, the more disturbance we're going to have. And so the plan now for these lots is to really pull them forward and create what the CAB had asked us to do, is create a custom lot, basically a lot that fits with the existing terrain of the parcel. Next slide, please. And so basically what you're looking at today is the driveway will come up, and the two dark black lines on each of those driveways is basically this kind of stepped wall concept. Helps us kind of reduce the wall heights and then kind of staggers them a little bit. But essentially you would have this pad, this lower pad that would be the garage at kind of the ground level, and then the house, and basically these are no longer manufactured homes, they're no longer modular homes. These would basically be custom built to these pads where you basically drive up to the garage level, and then the house would be built kind of into the hill above that garage level. And so as they're custom homes, we don't know exactly what the architecture, what's going to happen with those homes. And so these are basically pads that now these lots have access to these lots. They have the majority of the grading completed, and they basically got a pad where the garage would be to basically go vertical and build up into the lot. And so that's basically what this SUP is to ask for the grading to create these access to these parcels. They'll be built at some point. They're existing legal parcels, and so we feel like with the plan that we've done, we've listened to the CAB, but we've also come back and created a plan that shows basically kind of the minimum amount of disturbance you need to actually build a lot on these parcels. So some of the mitigation we've talked about, I'll get into a little more detail based on the CAB's direction, but some of the things we've looked at are these variances to the standards, the fills in the front yards, reducing that setback, keeping it kind of minimal. So we pull those pads down the hill, reduced a lot of the walls required. We've essentially removed all the fill. And we've drastically reduced a lot of the grading and disturbance requirements for these parcels. There's also going to be some landscaping along Cheyenne. And there is an existing ditch along Cheyenne that we are going to be improving. That is a code requirement for any development that you do. But we will be looking at basically including detention facilities in there, really improving that ditch and making it a better situation than it exists today. We'll also be looking at paving Cheyenne as well. Next slide, please. The wall type that we're proposing is a somewhat innovative wall. It's been used in other areas, but it's the idea here is to basically it allows you to have a stronger wall, or a wall that basically meets a structural standard that you can go, a rockery wall, you typically only go 6 feet, and these would allow us to go a little bit higher. I know it was talked about as 10. 10's mainly where the garage walls, when you go vertical with the house, these retaining walls will be actually a little bit shorter than 10 feet. In some cases, they're down to 4 or 5 feet, but in some cases where we do get into the 7s, it allows us to go a little bit taller than the rockery walls and still provide the same amount, if not better, stabilization of that hillside. And so that's where we've shown some examples of how these walls have been used in some other applications. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of comparison. I know Chris already kind of talked about that. So, but you can see just how these variants to standards allow us to kind of pull those pads down, utilizing the custom stepped pads as the cab had described, versus the going up the hill with the driveway and building a single pad for a single story home with stacked walls down below. We've basically changed that. We've gone to this access from Cheyenne, pull the pads down and make custom pads, and basically drastically reduced the disturbance of this, as you can see again in this table. Next slide. So some of the comments that we heard from the CAB and that have been addressed in this new plan. There was a CAB member that brought up manufactured housing. We weren't aware that did exist in the CC&Rs at the time. We went back. Our applicant went back and reviewed that, and we're in agreement that these will be custom stick-built homes. They're not going to be modular. They're not going to be manufactured. They will be traditional stick-built, kind of tied into that terrain. There was a comment about the flat pads and kind of the stepped walls, and we kind of talked about a little bit where we've gone away from that. We've gone to the step pads. We've pulled everything down the hill. And drastically reduced the amount of disturbed area, and the future custom homes will be kind of built kind of above the garage into the hillside, which is exactly what the CAB had asked for. And then there were some concerns about drainage. I think there was an email we saw recently that pointed out some existing conditions that has nothing to do with the existing parcels as today. And if anything, we're going to be going in there and per county code and per the conditions of approval, we will be looking at new detention facilities along the ditch along Cheyenne Drive and making sure that as this grading takes place and these houses are built, that we're not exacerbating that situation. And that is a county code requirement. But we will, as we come through, this is the first step in a process. As we come in with building permits and grading permits, the county will be looking at us addressing those conditions and addressing those specific drainage elements. And so we are planning to pave Cheyenne, and we are planning to fix that ditch. And so those are two of the things I think really will kind of help some of the comments that they brought up. Next slide, please. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. But again, just to recap, these are existing lots. They're legally created lots. And I think we've come up with a plan to really have the least amount of disturbance to provide access to a legally mapped lot. And so we're hoping that we've addressed the CAB's comments. We didn't take them lightly. We went back and spent a significant several months re-looking at this thing, and I think we've come up with a really solid plan that addresses their comments. Staff has a series of conditions that also go along with that, and we agree with those conditions. And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this matter?
I have no public comment in chambers.
I do have a hand raised via Zoom. Ms. Crane, I'm going to allow you to speak. If you could unmute and state your first and last name for the record, please.
My name is Shanda Crane, and I'm a resident at 17175 South Virginia Street, which backs up to Cheyenne, the easement drive known as Cheyenne previously. One comment that I did want to make, obviously I can speak on behalf of most of the residents here in this area. We are not opposed to new development in the area. We just want to ensure that the development is done correctly. Most of us have been out here for years and experienced a lot of erosion and drainage issues, so that's a big concern for us. And as a resident at the end of Cheyenne Drive, There's a known issue, which is a little bit south of the project proposed with that canyon. And when the Galena Creek Bridge was constructed, there was a known issue. They admitted to it where we created a lot of additional runoff that came down that canyon. And so my concern that I feel hasn't been addressed or outlined is how these additional lots, either during the construction of watering down and grading those lots, and then once they are actually homes for sale, what type of irrigation and landscaping we are putting up there that's going to create that runoff, and where is that water going. If we plan on allowing it to go down the canyon, that's going to potentially, that's going to disturb the neighbors on the south side. And we've seen it in the past, as soon as they built that Galena Creek Bridge, which is really far high up, we started seeing an increase of flooding, and they came through and did some mitigation to solve that problem. But if we add additional drainage or erosion to that, we're just going to have a new problem. So that's my concern. I would be excited to see this area grow, but if you went out and looked at the area in person, it's like we picked the biggest rock in South Reno and we're trying to develop it. And so I can definitely sympathize with the challenges, but we've got some serious grading and erosion that can happen with new construction up there. And that is all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no further comment via Zoom.
I do have a comment from John Titing.
Good afternoon. My name is John Tejan. I'm a homeowner on Cheyenne Drive. We actually have two places, one 5 Cheyenne and one 6675 Cheyenne, which are adjacent to the 3 properties that are going to be developed. Thank you for addressing a lot of our concerns, one being stick-built frame versus modular. I appreciate that. So we still have some concerns, and I think you if I understood what you said correctly about the drainage in the ditch coming down, there's been substantial amount of water that comes down because where they're building is it starts out as probably 15 or 20% grade, and above it it's 30% all the way to the top of the mountain. There's a lot of water that comes off of that. And there'll be more now because I'd say 75% of that mountain burned 2 months ago, which is concerning because all the vegetation is gone, except where they're going to do the grading. So again, they addressed a lot of our concerns as neighbors, and I feel better about it. Number one, the stick-built framed home. And obviously, it doesn't seem like, I mean, they're going to have to go vertical to be able to get to have any yard in the homes, but I just wanted to voice my concern about the drainage. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments?
I have no further public comment in chambers.
And none via Zoom.
Okay, we'll close public comment then. And do we have any questions for staff? Go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
I think actually this question is probably for the
Applicant?
applicant, yeah. And it's I'm thinking it may be an easy one. Could you put up those kind of creative looking wall photos, please? And the ones that you might be using?
These ones?
Because there's a lot of question earlier, of course, about the visuals from the existing homeowners and down the hill. Which of these, these are some options. Which of these are you thinking you might actually use, or do you know yet, or what's the current thinking on that?
I think the current thinking right now, especially like and Derek Kirkland, Wood Rogers for the record, representing the applicant. The top left, I think is probably more realistic next to the driveways. Where you get maybe closer to the house and you have a little bit shorter walls, you might see something more down towards the bottom right.
And did you say those can, if necessary, go up to 10 feet?
We won't be leaving any walls not capped. They'll all be capped. So I should just clarify that. So color is mainly just coloring, where the top gives you a little bit more of a natural color as it kind of blends with some of the natural vegetation.
Right.
So, but they'll all be capped similar to the bottom, correct? Correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh. I have a question for the applicant. Would it be okay to add a condition to state that modular homes will not be allowed on these properties?
The CC&Rs already state so. My name's Doug Barker, I'm the applicant. The CC&Rs already state that there's no modular allowed there. Actually, the way that it reads is nothing can be moved on the site that has been previously built, which there's sheds all over this neighborhood violating the CC&Rs from multiple property owners in the area that were most definitely pre-built. And it's my understanding that the county does not have any prerogative on CC&Rs or in areas where stick-built homes are allowed to do modular. However, that being said, nobody's going to put modular on that site. It's not an issue of being allowed to do so. It's an issue of legal liability and exposing yourself to being sued by your neighbors. So that would be the reason why stick-built houses get built there. It would be nothing that had to do with a condition. Thank you.
Okay, and are you going to provide infiltration from the runoff from impervious surfaces on each site?
Derek Kirkland with Wood Rogers for the record. Yeah, we'll be looking at part of what we'll do as part of the grading permit is we have to address all the county codes. We'll be looking at all the drainage above us. We'll be looking at what happens below us, and basically at the end of the day, as it leaves our site, we can't increase what happens there today. So we'll be, if anything, we'll probably be improving a lot of what's on the hillside. Because right now it just kind of comes down uncontrolled, hits that ditch and just goes everywhere. And
Right.
we're gonna be paving the road. We're gonna be looking at where it comes over our walls, and we're gonna be fixing a lot of what happens on the property today. Now, I can't speak for what happens below us, as that's an existing condition. That's not really our responsibility, but we will be addressing the subject parcels, the 3 acres, a little over 3 acres that we can control. And
So you
that
will be
getting
providing
improved.
infiltration on site?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sorry, it'll basically be detention, correct? Mike, I'll let our engineer talk a little bit more about that for you.
Good afternoon, Mike Vicks, Monta Vista Consulting. I'm the design engineer on the project. And infiltration may not be proposed. That would take an infiltration test. We're going to have to see what the permeability of the site is, but we will provide stormwater detention to ensure that the peak flows leaving the site are equivalent or improved when compared to the existing condition. And I would just like to point out that the concerns of Mr. Teagan and Ms. Crane are also our concerns as well. Erosion and drainage are a huge issue, especially after that fire came through. And the proposed improvements are going to provide stability to that slope. Right now, it's totally unrestrained. It's about a 3-to-1 slope, and all the natural vegetation that was on it has now burned. The proposed development is going to be a buffer between that slope and the downhill properties, and so we are very motivated to ensure the stability and drainage concerns are addressed fully.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stanley?
Yeah, and this, I guess, is a question for Chris or for Trevor. And it's a follow-up to your question about conditioning about having a stick-built home. Is that, and the applicant, I believe, said, if I understood it correctly, that's not within the purview of the county to condition or stipulate in any way, and does not if I heard him correctly, does the county and does this board have the, within its purview and the right to make such or suggest such a condition?
I'm going to defer that to Trevor or
Right.
legal.
Right, and I may need legal to weigh in, but yeah, my understanding, per code, we do not have the right to impose that condition. However, if the applicant so chooses, they can voluntarily agree to such a condition that can be then, it can be imposed by the Board of Adjustment. So.
Thank you. And of course, I raised that question since one of the concerns was stick-built homes, and you walked right up to the edge of that.
Can I?
If we're, please?
I'll just weigh in briefly. Because this is a request for a grading permit and a variance of development standards that relate to grading only. And so I wouldn't recommend necessarily that the board impose that condition. Obviously, as Trevor mentioned, if the applicants were to agree, that could certainly be memorialized in this fashion. But that seems to be a little outside the purview of the request that's currently before this board.
Another question for Ms. Gustafson. Should we include in the motion that there is a varying from the setback standards and grading standards?
Yes, this, similar to the previous
Okay.
hearing that we had, it looks like on page 3 of your staff report kind of summarizes the applicant's requested variances to the grading standards and the setback standard. So yes, I would, if this board decides to go that route, I would recommend that you tag that along on the end of your
Okay.
motion.
So in the future, I guess, when there's varying from the standards, we need to add that in the motion.
So
Mr. Stanley?
For clarification, thank you. For clarification, then, how would the motion read? Would it just refer to 45E, B, and 05, or what would be the most accurate way of doing that?
There's a bunch of ways you could do it, but you could.
What's an easy one?
Yeah, you could just, at the end of the motion language, say, and I also move to approve the applicant's requested variances to the grading standards and the setback standards listed on page 3 of the staff report. And if you wanted to read the codes, you could.
Thank you. Listed on page 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and if I understand this correctly, this is where the applicant could, if they wished, volunteer to memorialize the stick-built versus other kind of structures?
And to answer, yes, Mr. Stanley's question, that is correct. However, as,
It's not appropriate for the grading.
correct.
Not within the purview, okay.
Okay, do we have any other comments from staff or questions or, for the board? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Stanley, go ahead.
Thank you. I move that after giving reason, consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approved with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 21-009. 09, thank you, for American Patriot Homes, with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all of the findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, and also including conditions,
Variances.
grading, and setbacks listed on page 3 of the staff report. The findings include consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effects on a military installation.
All in favor?
Oh, this is Rob. I'll second it.
Oh, second. Thank you, Rob. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, do we need to
Thank
take a
you for your
break,
time,
or can
everybody. I
we
appreciate
do
it.
one more?
We've only got 2 left, right?
Just one.
One left.
Oh, 1?
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Oh, my God, are you okay? Let's bring the meeting back to order and have our last item. Special use permit case number WSUP 21-0020, St. Nicholas Orthodox Academy. Roger
Madam Chair,
Pelham, staff-
I apologize. If I may, Rob Pierce has not rejoined us yet.
Oh. Should we wait for him? I guess we should. He might die. I mean, not die. He might have left. That's what I meant.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay,
Will you just let us know when he does rejoin, and we can put that on the record?
okay.
Yes.
So go ahead, Roger.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. For the record, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning. There we go. Special use permit, case number WSUP 21-0020 is for St. Nicholas Orthodox Academy. Next slide, please. And this is a request, or the request was made for a temporary use. That is to say, 3 modular classrooms to add to a private school that currently exists. This is not a temporary use. This is a permanent use. We have temporary uses. Those are called out specifically in code, and private education is not one of those. The applicant requested with that to waive all of the landscaping and parking, also all the permanent improvements as required. Next slide, please. This isn't a temporary use, it's a permanent one. This site has been used for many things for many years. It was Glory Temple Church for quite a long time. This has come to the possession of the applicant a number of years ago. If you're familiar, they've done quite a lot of work. It looks much better now. It's rather attractive. They've put in some retaining walls. They've done a bit of sprucing up, especially where it's visible from 395. And generally speaking, this is an appropriate use for that area. But given that it is a permanent use and that they are expanding it, staff is recommending that all generally applicable code requirements be applied to this use. Next slide, please. This is located in the South Valleys Area Plan, here just south of Rhodes Road on the west side of 395 South, as shown on the vicinity map. Next slide, please. This is an overhead. You can see the little cluster of buildings here in the southeast corner. That is where most of the facilities are. The proposed temporary, or I should just simply say additional classrooms, are proposed to be located towards the center of the project site. Next slide, please. And this does show those proposed areas right there in the middle. The proposed modular classrooms, again, towards the center of the project site. Next slide, please. And this is what those classrooms are proposed to look like. And here are the floor plans, very simple, sort of little box that they bring in on wheels. Next slide, please. Again, my evaluation is that there are really very few immediate neighbors. The use is appropriate and not dissimilar to previous uses on the site. And given standard code requirements, staff has no objection. We have landscaping requirements. We have paved parking requirements. There's some disused signage on the site that should come down, and any new signage should meet current code requirements. Next slide, please. We did send this notice out to 43 affected property owners. The applicant did conduct a public meeting in lieu of a citizen advisory board meeting in that area. One fellow showed up, and there were no negative comments. Next slide, please. But the applicant can also address that. This went to all of the appropriate reviewing agencies, and no recommendations for denial were received. Those that provided conditions of approval have been included with your recommendation. Next slide, please. With that, I won't go through each of the findings, but this is consistent with the area plan. The site's suitable. The issuance is not detrimental in my opinion. Next slide, please. And finally, with that, I would like to recommend approval, subject to the findings and conditions as listed in your staff report. I'm available for any questions you may have, and the applicant's representative is here as well.
Great, thank you, Roger. Okay, the applicant, do you have a?
Madam Chair, if I may, I do just want to let the board know that Rob rejoined the meeting at 3:58, so he was there through most of that.
Good.
Good afternoon. For the record, Mike Rayleigh with Christie Corporation here representing St. Nicholas Orthodox Academy. I'll take that off so you can actually hear me. I do have just a brief PowerPoint. I think Roger did a very nice job. Next slide, please. Some of this will be redundant, such as the location and whatnot, so I won't bore you. If we can go to the next slide. Next slide. So this is an aerial view of the site, as Roger mentioned. And I just want to clarify on the temporary versus permanent. What the purpose of the temporary what we're calling temporary classrooms, the modular buildings, similar to what you would see at any Washoe County, elementary school, is to allow the school to begin operation while the main campus is being constructed. And that we just didn't have time. They're still in the design phase. We're probably going to come back with another special use permit for the actual permanent building itself, but they wanted to be underway. So that's why we're calling these temporary classrooms, because we've put a limitation of 3 years on those classrooms, and then they'll be removed. And that area that's already been previously graded, it fits well there, but that will be repurposed for another use associated with the school. Next slide. So these are some existing photos of the areas where the classrooms will go. As you can see, it's been graded. It has been overgrown a little bit with sagebrush and whatnot, but it is previously graded. The other thing that's nice about this location is putting those modular buildings up there. They're really not visible from the highway, so nobody really sees them. Next slide. And as Roger mentioned, that's the existing building and the kind of some of the outbuildings where the new school will be constructed ultimately. The site has some interesting history. It was originally a stage stop back in the 1800s, and then it served as a divorce motel where people could stay to claim their Nevada residency. So it's got a little bit of a colorful past, and then as Roger mentioned, most recently a church. Next slide. I think Roger did a good job going over the site plan. I'll skip that to the next slide. So let's go ahead and skip to the next slide. So as Roger mentioned, it essentially just establishes the ability to do a school there. The main campus will come back under a separate permit. With this phase, only 10 to 12 students and 4 full-time teachers and 1 half-time teacher would be on site. Already graded, the school hours are 9 to 3:30. We did hold a neighborhood meeting. I had 1 call in favor, 1 person came to the meeting in favor. So I think, it's a good use for the site. Next slide. Roger included that in his presentation. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Dr. Janet Cummings with St. Nicholas Academy is attending via Zoom, and she can answer any questions too regarding the operations if you have any.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment?
I have no public comment in chambers.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Okay, let's close public comment and bring it back to the board. And I have some questions. Maybe Roger, appropriately, are we going to, is there a condition to have parking and to have landscaping?
Yes. And
Okay.
essentially the condition is meet current code in all respects.
Meet what?
To simply meet, the generally applicable development code standards in all respects.
For parking and landscaping, including, because you.
It's required by code anyway.
Right.
We don't have to actually say it. We can simply say we're not waiving everything and we're good. And that just means go to the standard code, do what any civic or commercial use would be
So we're
required
not
to do.
varying those standards?
We are not.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Or at least that is my recommendation.
Right. And they're in the conditions of approval?
Yes.
Yes, great. Any other questions, Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. Roger, this wouldn't be the first time we've kind of seen you do this well. Am I reading this properly, that there were some existing problems which, with code and so forth, that this will address by, all right. So some other problems that might exist will be cleaned up and brought into,
Compliance?
thank you, that's the big word, compliance with the acceptance of this.
Yes, I believe that is a fair characterization of the situation.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Okay, well, do we need a discussion or comments? Rob, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. It looks like a good project. I am in support of it.
Okay, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. So I move that after giving reasonable consideration of the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, Washington County Board of Adjustments approves special use case permit WSUP 21-0020 for St. Nicholas Orthodox Academy with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter and does not vary any general applicable development standards, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washington County Code Section 110.810.30. That's consistency, improvements, site suitability, influence is not detrimental, and effects on military installation.
Great. Do we need to make those additional findings, the community character and significant degradation of air quality? That's new. Anyway,
I've never seen those before. Do I need to make those?
yeah.
Okay, with a minor adjustment to the recommendation, number 6, the community character is described in the character statement, can be adequately considered through mitigation of any identified potential negative impacts. And number 7, no sufficient degradation of air quality will occur as a result of this permit.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
You do.
Mr. Stanley seconds. All in
Thank you.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Mr. Lloyd?
There will be a training likely in November. That's all I have to
Oh, yeah,
share.
right.
Yeah.
I'll hold my breath.
Yeah, we've never heard that.
It's happened.
And that's 2021?
November? Do we have any requests from, for information from staff?
Unless he wants to volunteer something.
Yeah, I've got a question, or a request, I guess. What are the chances that we could get an occasional update on the new process to replace what used to be the cab process?
We will be bringing forward a full list of changes. At this time, we're not prepared to provide that yet. It's going to take a little bit of time to come up with a process, but we will bring that to the board.
As it progresses and so forth?
Once we formalize the process, yes.
I see, thank you.
And also, Jen brought up a point about the special use permits varying the standards, and so that we could put that into motion, that they are varying the standards or whatever, and,
We will make sure the motions contain that
Okay.
language, yeah.
okay, thank you. Okay, the next item, do you have something?
So, Mr. Lloyd, I guess when I heard that going on during that one application we made, isn't that covered in the document from staff of already making those recommendations? So then why do we need to restate it separately?
The variance, you mean?
It is part of the case description, and I agree with our legal counsel next to me that we should add that also as a motion to make it very clear that the board has also approved those variances in addition to the special use permit request.
Well, the special use permit is varying these standards. It's not a variance per se.
It's not a variance, it's varying standards.
Right.
But that needs to be, yes.
Part of the motion.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you have any report on previous Board of Adjustment items?
I have nothing to report.
Oh, great. Jen, do you have any legal information you want to share with us?
Mr. Large has not provided me with anything to pass along to you, so I do
Okay.
not today.
Thank you. There's no public comment that I can see. You guys have anything up your sleeve? Okay,
No
the meeting's
public
adjourned.
comment.
Thank you.